Hello guys. I'm back here with my 13th episode of Ammonia Voids, and this time I would like to spend some time on how you can work with certain darkness for your creative projects and personal life as well. I have recently seen two movies that really inspired me to do this episode. I thought they're kind of relevant for my work and the way I go about my life, so I thought I'd share them with you. They're called Demolition and Stutz, and if you haven't seen them, I highly recommend you to go find them on Netflix. And just beware, there's gonna be a little bit of spoilers in this episode, so feel free to put this episode on pause and come back when you watch the movies so that I don't spoil them for you. But first, I would like to dive into Demolition. Um, the synopsis is kind of that Jake Gyllenhaal, aka Davis Mitchell, is this investment banker, and he returns to work after his wife passed away in a car crash. And uh, it was a tragic car accident where they were together. And after writing a letter to complain about a vending machine in a hospital, he receives a phone call from Karen, who is played by Naomi Watts. And there she's like this customer service representative from the company, and they build this kind of friendship, and the movie revolves around that and how he deals with this loss. What I find particularly interesting in this movie is how this certain numbness of him is depicted in this Davis's behavior, how he deals with the death of his wife by trying to do insane things to make him feel at least something. And it makes it appear that this emptiness turns into madness, maybe even freedom, through destruction and demolition of his office, house, and belongings. And he's just like freely following his urge to smash things. He just doesn't give a damn about what other people think of him. And this was his way of how he processes his grief and releases these emotions out from his mind and body. I related to this movie a lot because I went through something similar, and that's where, well, it was the starting point of how I began my project called Oxymoron, which I'm now developing into a book. And it was a body of work which started from a lot of pain and grief, and I did felt this insane deadened state at the beginning, and that was something that particularly resonated with me in Demolition. And though I had like a bit different coping mechanism, it was mostly to watch people do extreme things in front of me. And the project really reached a new height for me because at some point I thought I really became mad or insane. Um, but at the ultimate peak of this project, it also felt so good because I didn't care at all. I didn't care about the judgment from other people. I just wanted to avoid feeling numb at all costs. And you start small, then you build up, and then you don't even notice how far you've come, and you're like, oh wow, okay, there has been quite some steps from where I began. Um, but eventually you reach a point when all these emotions, when all the grief come out, and you stop feeling these crazy urges. So you return to your sane self again. And I thought about this movie, or why I decided to talk about it, is how much creativity there is in this numb feeling. And let's say it's a negative emotion, and photography in this case can become one of the vehicles to let all out of it. um, I even remember this funnily enough, that during this period I came to help my friend demolish his house as he was in the process of reconstructing it. and it was so cathartic for me. So when I saw the scenes in the movie of how Jake Gyllenhaal is destructing his own house, I was like, wow, this was also me. This was also me. Um, but the takeaway from this was to remember that if you feel numb, try to work with it. Don't get stuck with the feeling. Instead, see where it can lead you, because there's a lot of creativity inside of it. And in a similar way, I mean, the movies are totally different from each other, but they touch upon similar things. So the second one that I would like to talk about in this episode is called Stutz. Um, Ironically, the person whom I helped to demolish his house recommended me this movie, so I recommended him Demolition back. So it's always like a loop, you know. And this movie is set up as a casual conversation between Jonah Hill with his psychiatrist Phil Stutz, who explores his early life experiences and also delves into his unique visual model of therapy. And first of all, it was kind of weird to see Jonah Hill in this kind of setting, but if you pass that feeling, it's actually very interesting. And there was a lot of concepts mentioned in the movie, and they were visualized in a very helpful way, which made them pretty understandable and almost banal, which is weird. But here I will just touch on few of them. But for a deeper understanding, I think it's best if you go see the movie yourself, so you can also see the visualizations and see more concepts if you like. So the first concept that I would like to talk about is called Part X. They talk about it in the beginning, and it's a force whose only purpose is to stop you from reaching your full potential. So this can represent hidden emotions like fear, shame, guilt, or unconscious patterns like self-sabotage, negative self-talk, limiting self-beliefs, or unexplored potential. So all these things that we all know, that we all share, and they sometimes come up. And what is interesting is that Stas says that part X is inside of us, and it's this voice of impossibility. And this voice is very much needed, as otherwise there is no growth. So it's basically something that pushes us to action. And I will quote him here. He says, creativity is in overcoming adversity. And this eventually, or what will make you happy, is the process of undergoing this. And he says this nice quote: stay grounded and reach for the stars. And winner is the one who takes the risk. You know, risk is something that I talk about a lot in also my previous episodes. So again, it's about this negative part of ourselves, and how it can be turned around into something positive or something that helps us to grow. The other concept that he's talking about is shadow. And in a way, they're kind of similar with part X, but it's a little bit different. This is the version of yourself that you want to hide, and it's the sum of the total weakest, most flawed, inferior, or even disgusting parts of ourselves. And it doesn't matter how rich, beautiful, or famous you are, as long as you fear that people see your shadow, you will be insecure. And especially the shadow comes out a lot in public presentations of ourselves. We deal with this kind of insecurity during public speaking, at social events, in confrontations with authority, etc. And it is a kind of a source of humiliation for us that we try to hide through some kind of perfectionism or bloated ego. And the counterintuitive truth is that when we reveal the shadow, when we give in to this imperfection, we become really vulnerable. The nature of this shadow changes, and instead it becomes a source of creativity and confidence. So when you create a bond with yourself and your shadow, They're no longer two separate beings and they become one. So once you accept your shadow with all your imperfections, the judgment from others doesn't really matter because you are content with yourself. So it creates this whole feeling. And I really resonated with this part because for Oxymoron, for my project, I created like a nocturnal alter ego, which was called Ruth. And I always thought that Ruth is so different from me, or people from my normal life never got to know Ruth and vice versa. And for me it was way easier to say, okay, this person is doing this because this person is not part of me. But at the end of the project I realized that alter ego is not separate from ourselves, it's very much part of ourselves. And it was my shadow. Ruth was always my shadow. It was my darkness. It was all the things that I never allowed, let's say, me, Linda, to explore or to express. That's what Ruth was doing for me. But when I reached the end of the project, I realized Linda and Ruth are actually one person. And it's, of course, very confrontational and painful. But when I realized that, I became so much more content with myself. I accepted myself the way I am, or or just it's fine, you know. And then the project itself started to bloom, and there was so much creativity that I found when I look back at the images. Maybe if I would not do this acceptance process, I would not see those things there. So this is just like an example how shadow can become something so strong for your work when you incorporate it within yourself. And the last concept that I would like to talk about is radical acceptance. And for Stutz, radical acceptance is like the opposite of judgment. And it's about accepting all parts of yourself and allowing them to exist. So something similar that I just explained to you with, with my alter ego. So the tool for this is what they call the grateful flow, a mechanism for positive thinking and avoiding negative thoughts by concentrating on the things that you are grateful for. It's very simple, you know. And they say like the smaller the things, actually the better. And it's this concentrated gratefulness that can be done continuously. And it's an act that can bring you a lot of warmth and comfort, even though it's so simple. And I think it's something that, like a nice activity that you can do for yourself, as we are usually too hard on ourselves than we should. It's like a redirection of thought. Let's say once a week you sit with yourself in the morning and do this exercise. Think about all the things that you're thankful for, and it can make a great difference in your day and overall way of thinking. I remember when I came back from my residence in Mexico, I learned some meditation practice and gratitude practice. Sometimes these words get really weird in Western context, so I try to be careful with it and how I use it or what it means to me. And these simple gratitude things, it can be like, oh, I'm grateful that I can have this meal today and that I can share a conversation with a friend. And instead of saying, oh, I was really bored today, or I felt stressed from work or from these emails, you just focus on the positive, and it makes such a difference in your mind because your mind starts to focus on the positive things instead of the negative ones. So what is actually the takeaway of these two movies that I tried to explain to you very shortly in these kind of 15 minutes? Both Demolition and Stutz are about what happens when we face the darker parts of ourselves, whether it's numbness or our shadow. Those states don't just hold us back, but they can become unexpected sources of energy, creativity, and even freedom. So the key is not to suppress them, but to use them as tools for a potential growth. And I hope you will find this episode useful, inspiring, and I really recommend you to watch the movie, so this episode can become even more relevant for you, and maybe even without watching it, you can get something out of it. Thank you for listening, and I see you next time. Ciao, ciao.